In early November 1963, the CIA station in Saigon was running at a pace few outside the intelligence world could imagine. The city was unstable, shaken after the coup that toppled President No Din Diem just weeks earlier. Streets were filled with soldiers, nervous checkpoints, and a new government still unsure of its footing. Amid the chaos, one message, stamped "Priority Immediate," arrived from a covert penetration inside a network of militant anti-American elements operating in South Vietnam. The message warned of a serious, organized threat against the upcoming visit of a U.S. executive-level figure. The CIA station chief in Saigon, John H. Richardson, recognized the implication immediately. President John F. Kennedy had been planning a high-visibility assessment of the Vietnamese situation, a visit meant to stabilize allies and reassure the new leadership. But according to the source, a well-vetted informant with a history of accurate intelligence, a coordinated attack was being prepared. The threat was not vague. Documents later declassified show clear wording. Hostile elements intend to target the U.S. senior leader. Preparation includes rifle teams and explosive devices. Richardson reported this directly to Washington. The cables, now public, show that by November 12, 1963, the CIA formally recommended postponing or altering the president's travel plans. The Saigon station insisted the threat was credible, coordinated, and growing. But timing was cruel. Washington was already concerned that Richardson's activities in Vietnam were politically sensitive. Just days earlier, he had been ordered home. His reports still reached the CIA's upper ranks, but without the weight his presence once carried. Meanwhile, back in Saigon, the small CIA team that handled the informant began to feel the ground shift beneath their feet. Surveillance around the source increased. Armed groups loyal to both former and emerging political factions were roaming the streets. The informant himself warned the CIA case officer that he had been followed twice. Each meeting became riskier. Declassified memos reveal the internal debate in Washington. Was the threat genuine, or simply one of many circulating in the chaotic aftermath of the coup? Ultimately, the administration chose not to announce any change in the president's plans. The men in Saigon read the final cable from Langley in silence. The president's motorcade route remained unchanged. His visit to Texas, scheduled before his potential trip to South Vietnam, would proceed as planned. Saigon's warning would be filed, acknowledged, but not acted upon. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Hours later, inside the CIA station in Saigon, the case officer responsible for the original intelligence wrote in his report, "We failed to save him, and our source will not live through the week." The last line would prove tragically accurate. As Washington reeled from the assassination, the CIA men in Saigon faced a new nightmare. Their informant had vanished, and someone else knew exactly what he had told them. Just hours after President Kennedy was pronounced dead in Dallas, the Saigon CIA station received a message that chilled the entire team. Their primary informant, the man whose intelligence had warned of a coordinated threat against the U.S. senior leader, had failed to appear at the secure rendezvous point. The informant, whose identity remains redacted in declassified documents, was a mid-level political operator with connections to militant anti-U.S. cells emerging after the Diem coup. CIA records describe him only as a reliable source with access to hostile planning elements. His tips had repeatedly checked out. But now, in the most dangerous week Saigon had faced since the coup, he had vanished. The CIA case officer assigned to him filed an immediate cable to Langley. Asset did not arrive. Probability compromise high. What happened next comes directly from Saigon Station after-action summaries. On November 24th, a South Vietnamese military contact quietly passed a warning to the CIA. Men associated with a newly formed extremist cell had been asking questions about Americans meeting with locals near Gia Dinh. This was the precise district where the informant last met the CIA. Worse, a body matching the informant's description had been found outside a canal the previous night. The report was delivered verbally, off the books, by a sympathetic officer in the South Vietnamese Special Branch. The CIA scrambled to confirm the identity. 2 station officers and a Vietnamese liaison went to the morgue under pretext. The official report, now declassified, notes, body showed signs of interrogation. Identification confirmed. The informant was dead, tortured, executed, and dumped. Inside the station, the reaction was a mixture of grief and dread. His death meant more than the loss of a source. It meant someone knew he had been passing intelligence to the Americans. And that meant someone knew exactly what he told them, including the warning about the assassination threat. A second cable from Saigon to Langley, dated November 25th, added a stark assessment. Information leak likely originated within GVN, Government of Vietnam, security elements recently reorganized after coup. Hostile elements appear aware informant alerted CIA regarding threat to U.S. leadership. This placed the surviving CIA officers in immediate danger. It also meant the political fallout from the assassination of President Kennedy now had a hidden overseas dimension, one the public would never hear about. Within days, surveillance teams in Saigon reported unidentified men trailing one of the American case officers associated with the earlier intelligence report. The station chief ordered all field officers into restricted movement. No one was allowed to meet sources without a high-risk review. By November 28th, the retaliatory threat was so serious that Saigon Station activated a classified internal protocol, an emergency extraction list, in case any American officers needed to be quietly evacuated. The tragedy was now twofold. They had failed to protect their source, and now they might not be able to protect themselves. In the weeks after the informant's murder, the tension inside the CIA station in Saigon became almost unbearable. According to declassified cables, the station filed 4 separate urgent security incident reports between December 1st and December 14th, an unusually high number for such a short period. The most alarming involved the officer who had handled the original assassination warning intelligence. His name remains redacted in public documents, referred to only as Case Officer A. All files, however, confirm the same core events. On December 2nd, the South Vietnamese Special Branch quietly informed Saigon Station that men linked to a hardline faction within the coup leadership had been watching the home of an American official. A Special Branch memo, handwritten, later translated and included in CIA archives, stated, "Foreign officer is target. Retaliation likely connected to information leaked by deceased source." The CIA took the warning seriously. Case Officer A had already reported being followed twice. On one occasion, 2 men on a motorbike lingered outside his temporary residence, then slowly trailed his vehicle until he reached the secure compound. Tail teams lost them in traffic. The situation worsened days later. According to a now declassified security cable, dated December 6th, a Vietnamese informant approached the CIA with a disturbing message. A faction aligned with the former military intelligence directorate believed the Americans had interfered in internal power decisions after the coup. The death of the CIA's informant, they claimed, had revealed that Washington knew more about internal plots than it publicly admitted. They viewed this as betrayal. One line from the cable stands out starkly. Case Officer A identified by hostile group as the American who knew physical harm possible. The station chief moved quickly. Case officers were reassigned. Routes to work were changed daily. Armed escorts were provided at night. Internal records show that Langley authorized maximum discretion and avoidance of exposure. But Saigon in December 1963 was a city spiraling beyond anyone's control. On December 10th, Case Officer A was returning from an approved liaison meeting when his vehicle was cut off by a jeep near Hao Jong Street. 2 men jumped out, shouting in Vietnamese. Before the CIA officer's driver could accelerate, a crowd began to gather. Shots were fired into the air. A South Vietnamese police truck suddenly approached, scattering the attackers. Whether by coincidence or rescue, to this day, remains unclear. The CIA's own summary admits, uncertain if incident was premeditated attack or intimidation attempt. But the message was unmistakable. The officer's life was in immediate danger. On December 12th, Washington approved an urgent rotation. Case Officer A would be evacuated out of Saigon under non-official cover. The paperwork was rushed, the exit classified. Yet the price of survival was steep. Declassified Inspector General notes reveal that the officer suffered severe psychological strain, requiring evaluation after returning to the United States. A 1964 entry reads, "Officer reports guilt regarding loss of source and belief that threat could have been prevented." The tragedy had begun to consume not only those killed, but the men still living. After Case Officer A was quietly evacuated from Saigon, the atmosphere inside the CIA station did not calm, it worsened. With the assassination of President Kennedy still fresh and politically radioactive, Langley initiated a sweeping internal review of every intelligence warning sent from foreign stations in the months prior. The Saigon station, already fractured by the Diem coup, informant death, and retaliation threats, now found itself under intense scrutiny. The Inspector General's office in Washington demanded complete logs, agent handling notes, source evaluation files, and internal communications tied to the early November warning. Declassified IG memos show that the tone was blunt. Determine whether intelligence was properly collected, evaluated, and transmitted. Inside the station, the officer now in the spotlight was Case Officer B, the man who had supervised the deceased informant's broader reporting program. IG documents do not provide his name, but they detail the pressure he endured. On December 18th, Case Officer B was ordered to provide a full statement, including every meeting with the informant, all threat assessments he had personally drafted, discrepancies between his field notes and the final cable sent to Washington. The officer complied at first, but the IG team's second request cut to the bone. They wanted every detail of his source validation process, implying that the CIA needed to determine whether he had overstated the assassination threat or failed to emphasize its severity. The implication felt like accusation. According to declassified excerpts from his personnel file, Case Officer B pushed back, arguing that the warning had been clear, credible, and repeatedly communicated to Washington. The IG's reply, recorded in a February 1964 memo, was cold. Officer exhibits emotional investment that may impair judgment. Privately, other CIA officers in Saigon told investigators that Case Officer B had struggled after the informant was killed. One colleague described him as haunted, another as unable to sleep. The IG's report later noted, Officer demonstrates signs of stress, guilt, and fear of responsibility regarding Asset's death. Then came the breaking point. In early January 1964, Langley requested that Case Officer B undergo a formal security and psychological evaluation. CIA records show he interpreted this as an accusation, that he had mishandled the source, the warning, or possibly leaked sensitive handling details that led to the informant's death. The officer's diary entries, partially declassified after his death, paint a devastating picture. They think I failed him. They think I failed the president. I cannot defend myself. The truth is locked behind classification stamps. Colleagues urged the IG's office to show leniency, noting that the officer had lost a valued source, witnessed growing hostility from Saigon factions, and believed he could have stopped the president's death if Washington had responded differently. But internal investigations are unforgiving machines. By February 1964, Case Officer B was removed from sensitive operational duties. His requests to return to full field work were denied. Files show the IG recommended reassignment to headquarters, effectively sidelining him. The man who had tried to warn Washington was now being handled as a liability. And behind him, the Saigon station continued to spiral. At the very moment intelligence hinted that the informant's death had not ended the threat, but opened the door to something far more dangerous. By February 1964, the CIA station in Saigon was one of the most embattled in the world. The Diem coup had shattered existing power structures, militant factions were multiplying, and CIA operations were under more scrutiny than ever. But the greatest blow came not from the streets, it came from within. A series of declassified cables titled Suspected Compromise of Station Operations revealed that intelligence meant only for internal CIA distribution had begun circulating among South Vietnamese security officers and political factions. The first sign surfaced on February 11, 1964, when a South Vietnamese liaison quietly warned Saigon station that hostile elements possessed detailed knowledge of a CIA asset roster, including descriptions of at least 3 Vietnamese sources. One of those descriptions matched the informant killed in late November. A CIA security cable, dated the same day, recorded the station's alarm. Leak originated from American Psi Probable. Internal breach must be considered. This was not speculation, it was the CIA's own conclusion. Over the following weeks, the situation deteriorated. The second memo, now declassified, states, hostile actors referencing content consistent with restricted U.S. intelligence reporting. Potential access point unknown. For the first time since the Vietnam program began, Saigon Station initiated an internal counterintelligence sweep against its own personnel. Washington authorized a security office team to investigate. Their findings, released decades later, reveal 3 critical vulnerabilities. Sensitive reports were being circulated using unsecured diplomatic channels. Political pressure after the Diem coup, led to rapid personnel turnover. Temporary staff unfamiliar with strict CIA protocols handled classified material, increasing the risk of accidental exposure. Multiple South Vietnamese officers were granted access to joint intelligence briefings. Post-coup restructuring blurred lines between U.S. and GVN intelligence responsibilities. Documents marked limited distribution had been improperly shared. A CIA officer in Saigon had become mentally unstable. This officer, named only as employee redacted in released IG documents, had been relieved of duties during the post-assassination review. Security memos expressed concern about his emotional deterioration and disclosure risk. He was not accused of betrayal, but he was labeled a potential vulnerability. One line from a March 1964 cable stands out. Employee's psychological condition may lead to inadvertent compromise. This officer was Case Officer B, already shattered by the informant's death and the IG's investigation. His colleagues later told security evaluators that he had begun speaking recklessly about the assassination warning, the internal review, and his belief that Washington needed someone to blame. Declassified medical assessments note. Officer exhibits acute stress reaction, intrusive guilt, and fear of being scapegoated. None of this was treason, but it was enough to justify immediate containment. On March 29, 1964, Case Officer B was ordered back to the United States under an emergency security directive. His departure was recorded as routine rotation, but internal notes show otherwise. Return handled discreetly to avoid station speculation. The removal did not solve the problem. On April 3, 1964, another cable reported a new breach. Hostile Vietnamese elements had obtained partial transcripts of an American internal briefing. The station chief wrote, "Breaches indicate pattern. Uncertain whether operational or human error. Inside Saigon Station, morale fractured. Some believe hostile Vietnamese factions were intercepting communications. Others believed the leaks came from Washington. A few whispered what no one dared say openly. Maybe the enemy isn't out there. Maybe it's here." The first collapse, Case Officer B. After being pulled back to the United States under a routine rotation that was anything but routine, Case Officer B underwent mandatory security debriefings, mental health evaluations, and a review of his actions related to the assassinated informant. The evaluations, heavily redacted but now public, paint a bleak picture. Officer unable to accept uncontrollable operational variables. Displays fixation on failure to prevent asset termination. Emotional exhaustion severe. Not fit for field duty. He was removed from operational assignments permanently. In August 1964, the CIA's Personnel Office quietly reclassified him into a non-sensitive analytical role. He never returned to overseas service. His IG file notes. Career progression halted due to operational trauma and compromised judgment. The man who had tried to save a president had his own career destroyed instead. The second collapse, Case Officer A. Meanwhile, the officer who had been targeted on the streets of Saigon, Case Officer A, was also deteriorating. Declassified medical files reveal that after his extraction, he developed chronic anxiety, operational paranoia, recurring nightmares related to the informant's torture. One report notes, officer believes hostile elements will seek him even in U.S. territory. His family later told investigators that he insisted on checking windows and locks multiple times each night. By mid-1964, he requested separation from the agency. His resignation was processed quietly. His exit interview, now public, is only 2 sentences. "I cannot operate knowing the men we rely on die, because we cannot protect them. I should have saved him. He never worked in intelligence again." The station silenced. With both officers removed, the CIA concluded its post-assassination inquiry. Its final assessment, declassified decades later, contains a chilling admission. The threat reporting from Saigon in November was credible and conveyed in proper channels. Another line follows. Its potential implications remain politically sensitive. The entire operation, from the assassination warning to the failed protection of the informant to the retaliatory targeting of CIA personnel, was quietly buried under classification. It became one of the many intelligence tragedies folded into the larger chaos of America's deepening involvement in Vietnam. And yet, buried in a 1964 Saigon Station wrap-up report is one line that stands as the final truth. The men involved acted professionally. Their actions, though unrecognized publicly, removed significant risk to the president's planned travel to Vietnam. In other words, they succeeded, but too late. The president they tried to protect died in Dallas. The informant who tried to warn them died in Saigon. And the officers who carried the burden never recovered. The operation saved a president who never arrived and destroyed the men who tried.